1 Kings chapter 3. If you're there, just say amen. I want to start reading at verse 16, and then I'll go back and use the other parts of the passage. Verse 16 says, "Sometime later, two prostitutes came to the king to have an argument settled. 'Please, my lord,' one of them began, 'this woman and I live in the same house. I gave birth to a baby while she was with me in the house. And 3 days later, this woman also had a baby. We were alone. There were only two of us in the house. But her baby died during the night when she rolled over on it. Then she got up in the night and took my son from beside me while I was asleep. She laid her dead child in my arms and took mine to sleep beside her. And in the morning, when I tried to nurse my son, he was dead. But when I looked more closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't my son at all.' Then the other woman interrupted, 'It certainly was your son, and the living child is mine.' 'No,' the first woman said, 'the living child is mine, and the dead one is yours.' And so they argued back and forth before the king. And then the king said, 'Let's get the facts straight. Both of you claim the living child is yours, and each says that the dead one belongs to the other. All right, bring me a sword.' So a sword was brought to the king. Then he said, 'Cut the living child in two and give half to the one woman and half to the other.' Then the woman, who was the real mother of the living child and who loved him very much, cried out, 'Oh, no, my lord. Give her the child. Please do not kill him.' But the other woman said, 'All right, he will be neither yours nor mine. Divide him between us.' And then the king said, 'Do not kill the child, but give him to the woman who wants him to live, for she is his mother.' When all Israel heard the king's decision, the people were in awe of the king, for they saw the wisdom God had given him for rendering justice." I want to talk this morning about a choice that changes everything. A choice that changes everything. Admittedly, you and I recognize that we have a faith that doesn't exempt us from having to go through difficulty. But what we have is a faith that enables us to persevere and to make our way on the journey. Solomon is a man who has been thrust into a position, a posture, where the proof of his faith is about to be not only tested, but the reality of his faith is a demonstration of his love for the Lord and his commitment to love people. Solomon has entered into a position of power in which he was not prepared. Solomon has moved into the seat of his father David upon the throne of the king. And there was nothing that could have prepared Solomon for the task. And so one day, in a dream, God had given Solomon the opportunity to ask for what he wanted. And instead of asking for victory over his enemies, instead of asking for riches and prominence and prosperity, the only thing Solomon did was ask God to give him an understanding heart. And God said, "Since you only asked me for wisdom, I'm going to give to you all the things you didn't ask for. And I'm going to give you a wisdom that will be unparalleled by any king anywhere ever." You know, you ought to be careful when God asks you a question, because how you respond to him could change everything. It's not that God doesn't know, which provokes him to ask. It's that we need to know where we are. And when Solomon gives God the response of, "Just give me an understanding heart," it's because Solomon recognizes that his call is not his call, and he recognizes that his responsibility is not just to the people, but his responsibility is also to God. And the thing that makes this narrative significant, at least in my mind, is that Solomon begins this whole world-renowned portrait of him that will ultimately be presented. He begins it by simply asking God for wisdom. There are people who think that wisdom is knowing right and intelligent things. There are people who believe that wisdom is somehow having answers to difficult questions. That is not why Solomon was able to do what he did. Wisdom, according to the scriptures, begins with a fear, a reverence of God. Wisdom is not being smart. Wisdom is not knowing some things. That's not wisdom. Wisdom is simply fear, reverence of God. Show me a woman, show me a man, show me a leader who does not fear God, and I'll show you someone who is galactically stupid. Wisdom is not having degrees. Wisdom is not having an education. Wisdom is the fear of God. That's how it starts. And so this one choice of Solomon's to ask God whom he reveres, to ask God whom he fears, this one choice of Solomon to ask for it is located in the posture of his heart, not the amount of stuff he has in his head. He begins by, first of all, just trusting God, because when you trust God, you are now on your way to making incredibly wise choices. Apart from trusting God, you will never make wise choices. In fact, apart from trusting God, you don't have the capacity to make wise choices. That's why it is the fear of the Lord that begins the whole enterprise. Am I making sense to you at all? Wisdom is not what they told you it was. It is not getting degrees. It is not always having right answers. Wisdom is not what they said it is. Wisdom is when you fear God. Because if you don't fear or revere God, I'm not talking about cowardice. I'm talking about reverence for God. When you don't have reverence for God, if you don't revere the Creator, then I'm in trouble. Because if you don't revere the Creator, you can never respect the creature. And if I as a creature have been made in the image of the Creator, but you don't revere the Creator, then I don't stand a chance. That's why you can't expect people who don't love God to love people who are made in God's image, no matter what they say. Because if you can love God, who you have never seen, how can you not love your brother, your sister, who has been made in God's image, even if they're gay? I said it. Because the world perceives that Christians hate people who we call sinners. And if they are in fact sinners, then the responsibility of the Christian is to not hate sinners, it is to love sinners. Isn't that what Jesus did for us? How is it the world believes we are anti-everything? I talk to homosexual people and they say, well, the church is anti-homosexual. Stop. The church cannot be anti-anybody. I'm against lying, but I'm not anti-liars. I'm against drunkenness, but I'm not anti-drunks. And I'm against homosexuality, but I'm not anti-homosexual. Because to be like God is to love people who are made in God's image, even if they're broken. Solomon begins this because Solomon has a reverence for God, a fear of the Lord. That is the beginning of the choices he will make. And it is the choice that will change everything. These two women come to him as people who are prostitutes. And they come to Solomon with a grievance. And as good a king as Solomon is, there's something deeper in the text that he just can't fix. Because while he can handle the grievance between two people who are disgruntled and have a problem, they have an issue with each other, this king can help remediate that, but there's another issue that's deeper that he can't resolve. You say, what is that issue? First of all, somebody would need to address why they are prostitutes in the first place. They are prostitutes because they are caught in a social context, a system that has locked them out. In fact, the word used in the Hebrew is zona. It means strange woman. In the nation of Israel, when they looked at prostitutes, they called them strange women, zona, Z-O-N-A. It identified them as being outside. You see, these people, these women, they are not outlaws, but they're outside. Can you imagine what it would have been to be them in this text? They had been ostracized because without a husband, without a family, the only way they could take care of themselves would have been prostitution. And so they're outside, but not outlaws. They are desired and despised. They are sought and they are shunned. Can you feel their predicament? Can you feel what has placed them in the position of poverty and abuse they have now had to endure? And they come to the king looking for justice from the king. They come to the government. They come to the powers that be looking for, get this, justice and mercy. You see, that's what I like about God. In fact, justice and mercy are two irreconcilable things. How in the world can you get justice and mercy? They don't go together. If I get justice, it means I get what I deserve. If I get mercy, it means I don't get what I deserve. And I'm glad that there is a king who can provide both. Because I don't want what I deserve. I know some of you all don't think you deserve anything other than. But if the curtains were pulled down from all of us and we got what we really deserved, have I got a witness? If you really got what you deserve, you'd all be running, ducking, and dodging. But I'm glad there's a king who knows how to remediate both justice and mercy and provide me with what it is I need. They come to the king seeking justice, seeking mercy. And Solomon is able to look past who they are. You say, Williams, why is this significant? He can't ignore the fact that sometimes good people end up in bad situations. You see, the text says that there was a woman of the two. She came to Solomon in verse 16 saying, please, my Lord. She comes seeking justice from the king. She initiated this. And Solomon is able to recognize that this woman is something other than a prostitute. You see, there are some people who are good people, but they find themselves in bad situations. And they need a king who cannot limit the essence of who they are to their situation. You see, there's a thing about God that looks, somebody said he looked behind my faults and he saw my needs. Solomon is able to recognize she ain't just a prostitute. She's a mother. And he's able to peer through the social context that has created her and made her out to be an outcast. And he's able to peer through that and recognize that's not all she is. Because there are some people who only identify you on the basis of your need and what the culture says you are. We need a king that can peer through that and see that we're more than that. And let me just offer this, since I'm talking about governments and this kingly rule. Let's just be clear about something. Under the new covenant in the New Testament, there is no nation, no government that represents the kingdom of God. Ain't nobody, the United States included, gonna escape judgment. He gonna judge every nation, and especially the ones that call themselves God-fearing. Every nation gonna be judged by God. And those of you who think that you live somehow in a Christian nation, have a conversation with a Native American. Every government is going to have to stand and be judged before God. And you know what? I'm throwing off all the governors. Can I talk to you where I feel like talking? I ain't mad at Kim Davis for denying them folks a license based upon her so-called religious conviction. But what I'm going to tell you is, I don't want nobody to govern me based upon their religious conviction. You see, when the same-sex people come in and they want a license, and the Christian says, based upon my Christian faith, I can't give you one. What happens when two other people come in for a divorce decree and the Roman Catholic says, based upon my religious conviction, I can't give you a decree to divorce? What happens when the person standing behind the counter is an atheist or a Buddhist or a Hindu? I don't want you to govern me on the basis of your theological conviction. I want you to govern me on the basis of the law and treat me and give me everything I'm entitled to as a citizen just because. Barack Obama is not the president of the United States. He's not the pastor of the United States. He's the president. You got a pastor. And if you want to understand scriptures, go to the pastor. Go to Bible study. But don't ask the president to be the pastor, because the president has to govern everybody, not just Christians, not just those he likes. He's got to govern whoremongers, homosexuals, gamblers, thieves, liars, and everybody else. And he's got to be fair constitutionally. He's able to see that they are not just their situation. They're not just prostitutes. He understands that there's a heart of a mother in one of them. And rather than relegate her to the category of hoe and hooker, he realizes there's a mama in there somewhere, and I want to get to that. You keep looking to Democrats and Republicans. That's right, I'm quoting Kendrick Lamar. You keep looking to them to do it. We need another kind of a king that can judge righteously and fairly and can get beneath the surface and bring us to where we want to be. He wants us to be and restore our humanity, not continue to destroy it. And it starts with a choice to first trust him. You see, even in a hostile governmental world, we can still thrive. Why? Because God calls us to live with a different set of values that impacts the culture, not crushes it. And they can look at us and they can see that there's a difference. But the choice begins with a choice to fear God, to revere God, and then walk with him. God, listen, the responsibility of the government is to protect the rights and the freedoms of everybody, not just the ones they like. That's fair. And that becomes an enormous choice. And this is why when you look at this woman, you see that he recognizes her as a mama. Let me tell you something. Society can't make that distinction. Because society can't see the good in the ugly. See, no matter who you know, no matter how bad they are, there's some good in them. And the people you know, no matter how good they are, there's some bad in them. Yeah, that's who we are. I know you ain't going to admit it. Right now, you would rather pretend to be pious. But in every good person, there's some bad. Riding along one day in my car, tractor trailer kicks up a stone, chips my window. Followed him all the way to Route 10. Then he dropped the F word on me. And the Reverend opened up his car door. As I was going out the car door, the Holy Ghost was pulling me. Said, if you act up out here on Route 30, Route 10, it's going to be in the Deli Local. And sucking hard. So I was seething. And I could look at the man in the truck and tell it would be an easy win. Holy Ghost said, let him go on. And completely, see, when God is holding you back sometimes, you feel like you've been punked. And that's why it's so hard. Because your ego is all up in it. And you feel like, how in the world can they do that to me? I'm not going to let them do that. And so you keep pushing because what you want is a fight and you want to fix it because you ain't going to do that to me. But God has to say to us, you ain't never going to be hurt the way y'all hurt me. And I took it. So if I took it, I'll give you the strength so that you can take it and my glory can be established. And I know it's hard because every now and then ain't nothing better than a good, fair one. But God says if you just hold your peace, I'll fight your battle. You don't have to fight for yourself. Just sit down, take off your gloves, and let me handle it. Is there anybody here that ever saw God handle their business? We got a king that'll handle business. And so they come looking for the king to handle it, and he recognizes that there is something here. He can see this is the problem. This is the problem of the society that can't see the good and the ugly, but it's also the issue of prejudice. And I'm almost done, but I want you to see this. This is the issue of prejudice. When you judge people based upon their initial presentation without really knowing who they are at a deeper level. They just look like prostitutes. But really there's a mother here with a mother's heart. And this is a king who can see through that. That's why as Christians, sometimes our way, we live according to the way of the cross, and it seems like foolishness. But the choice to live by way of the cross is not a foolish choice. 1 Corinthians, it seems like foolishness to others, but we know that it's the wisdom of God. The cross doesn't look like it makes sense. It looks stupid because the cross is the place that looks like losing when really it's the place of victory. At the cross, at Calvary, at the same place, at the same time, both the wrath of God and the love of God is poured out at the same time. And I know sometimes it's hard, but the choice begins fearing God and recognizing what it is God has placed in people. The text says that at the end of the day, when Solomon decides to cut the baby in half, his wisdom is now revered. And this is not unusual because the wisdom of Mesopotamian kings was always written down. And so Solomon would be revered for having made an incredibly wise decision. But his decision was based upon another choice that changed everything. Every decision he made was the result of his fear of the Lord as the first choice. And it doesn't mean you won't be pressed. You see, he prayed and said, God, give me wisdom. And the next thing God did was put him in a situation that was hard. It's what happens to you when you pray for patience. You say, God, give me more patience. And then God sends a flurry of stuff. And you stand there going, why? And God says, well, you asked me for patience. How else am I going to give you patience if I don't put you in some pressure? He asked for wisdom, God gave him wisdom, and then God sent him sometimes later, the text says, the most difficult challenge of his administration. And he used it as a platform to elevate. That's what happens to us in our lives. He elevates us using different pressures and problems to take us higher. The end of the story is that the decision is made, the child is not killed, the child is given back to the mother. Let me tell you the thing about this that just boggles my mind, then I'll sit down. What is incredibly interesting to me in this text is that the prostitutes had access to the king. How do hookers get an audience with the king? How do outcasts, outsiders, shunned, despised, how do they make it into the presence of the king? One of the things that's irking me, it's not personal, it's not aimed at Pope Francis. What's bugging me is I went into the city yesterday, and a trip that should have taken about an hour took about an hour and 45 minutes. And I understand it. You're trying to put your best face on because you got to make sure that there was security in place, etc. Last night, they started towing cars. And what bothered me was that I realized he's coming, but you have messed up all kinds of access to the degree that if I wanted to see him, I wouldn't be able to get to him. Because you guys have tightened up security in such a way that even if I wanted an audience with him, I could not get it. Because I'm not special enough. The only way you're going to get an audience with him is you got to be selected. I'm glad there's another the Holy Father, because there ain't but one. I'm glad that because of Jesus, my access to the King, no matter what my situation, is assured. And I can get to him, lay out my need, and this is a king that will judge rightly. This is a king that can see through me, supply what I need according to his riches and glory. And the choice you ought to make this morning is to make your way to the Father through the Son who's provided you access. You can't get to God on the basis of trying to do good things. No man comes unto the Father but by me, Jesus said. And I'm glad this morning that I've got a Father who cares, who's concerned, who comforts, and will keep me. Do I have a witness?